What's going on, guys? John here. So in this video, I'm going to talk about something that's super important, really important. What do you do if your tenant is not paying rent? Let's say you own a property or two properties, and right now you have maybe 25% vacancy, and you think you might go up to 50% next month. And you know right now courts are closed. And if you go up to 50% vacancy, you might not be able to make your debt commitments, your mortgage commitments, and you might lose everything. This is a huge concern for a lot of investors. Some investors are saying they'll pursue the forbearance route. However, if you do this and your mortgage company submits this to the credit bureaus, then this could affect you with a cash out refinance. This could affect you down the road and in a negative way, especially if we're stepping into a large recession like I think we're going to, and now you're unable to take advantage of those underpriced deals because of this forbearance. It really impacts you. It really impacts you. So in this video, I'm going to teach you what you can do to mitigate any potential losses and how to reposition yourself in a position of power and really move forward and help that tenant as well indirectly. So it's going to be a real win-win for everyone involved. So please like, comment, and subscribe. Tenants today are more organized, more educated, and more collaborative than ever before. Over the last decade, they've really had all of their rights distributed online, and they communicate with one another and share their experiences. They take pictures of the units and share their images online. They can reach out to legal counsel very easily, get free consultations, and see if they have any type of position on the landlord to either not pay rent or possibly extract capital or cash from the landlord. This is very, very common. This is very, very common. Even, for example, this right here, rentstrike.org. It says, if you look on the line here on the first paragraph, currently the housing crisis is completely out of control. 40% or more of one's paycheck is spent entirely on landlords who provide nothing to society. Now, some would read that and they would look at that and say, you know what, landlords are the problem. However, if you are the landlord, take a step back completely. And this is not an attack on you. This is an attack on the overall system. The system is what they've been told when they were very young, that they got a good job and they really worked hard and applied themselves, they would be able to afford a really nice place to live and go on vacation and have money in the bank and dress nice and eat well and take care of themselves and have a family and live the quote-unquote American dream. And well, today that's just not possible for most people following the traditional path that society has laid out for them. And now with rent being so expensive, they think that the landlord is the one that is possibly holding them back from them living the life that they deserve. And that being said, they have a position against landlords that are, in their view, in their way. If you Google landlords are, you'll see a list of the most common search results. However, this could also be biased through Google, and this might just be what they want you to see. However, if this is true and this is what they are thinking, then all this means to you is that it's much easier for you to reposition yourself in a better light than what they already assume. They assume that you are trying to take money from them. However, what you really are doing is you're offering them a clean, nice place to live, and you are listing that place for rent, and they come to you and they are a ready, willing, and able tenant, and they sign a contract with you, and that contract states that they will pay you on the first of the month and that you will abide by the rules in that contract, meaning if you wanted to access the unit, you would give them written notice. If you had a repair request, you would fulfill that repair request. And so what happens? 2 months in, 3 months in, 6 months in, they are really tight on their bills. They lose their job and they run into financial hardship, and now they want to point the finger at you because everything in their life is not going right. And that, unfortunately, is just not that simple. It's really not. And you being a landlord, now you have to take on that responsibility of asking yourself, now what do you do? What's the smart plan of action? Some people would want to react emotionally with a situation like this and get upset. I think the best thing always is to take a step back and exercise every possible option that you have within your scope. So, right now, courts are closed. So, depending upon where you're located, courts are going to be closed, and when they reopen, they're going to be very backed up. So, you need to factor this into your equation. So, I'm going to run through right now 3 scenarios that you could exercise one of these 3 to limit any type of financial exposure that you'll have due to this tenant. So, option 1 is a really good option, and option 1 is to establish a relationship with the tenant. So, you establish a relationship with the tenant, and then you use that relationship as a way to enable everyone to win. That tenant most likely does not want to be in that unit feeling uncomfortable and stressed out about possibly being evicted and going through all that. So, what I would do is not position yourself as the person of authority. The old saying is true, you catch more flies with honey than you will vinegar. So, you hopping on the phone and speaking with that tenant, possibly having a cup of coffee with that tenant or talking to that tenant and seeing where they stand with their job, where they stand income wise, how you can help them. I know it kind of seems unorthodox because you would want them to be helping you, but know how you can help them. So if they're in a bad situation right now, one way that you could possibly frame this, let's say that they're 1 month behind, would say, I have a security deposit from you for $2,000. And it might take you a couple months to find a place to live. So, how about we work together here? How about you keep the inside of the apartment really nice and you let me list the apartment for rent and allow me to show the unit with 24 hours notice. And I'm going to list the unit for lease and I'm going to work to find a new prospective tenant. And what I can do for you is you let me find this new tenant and you pay me half of the rent that you owed me from last month. And we'll give the other half, that's just a gift from me to you. And I'm going to give you a really good reference and just allow me to rent the unit. And you'll be able to rent the unit pretty quickly if you price it right. And that'll be that. So yes, you will take a small loss here. The rent's $2,000 and you give them 50% off, you'll lose $1,000. However, you don't want to be what's called penny smart and dollar stupid. And what I mean by this is saying, you know what, I want the full amount. I want the full amount. Then what's going to happen is the tenant doesn't have the full amount and they don't have a job or they don't have a source of income. And so now you're going to be stuck with someone that won't be able to come up with the money and they have no financial incentive to leave. So you giving them their deposit back, that $2,000, incentivizes them to cooperate with you and to work with you. You literally could just give them $1,000 back for the deposit and then that's it. So that's one really good way to work the really kind of like work the relationship in that system to benefit everyone involved. You have to realize too that if they say no to this deal, then you look at your alternatives. The alternative is going to likely be going to court, and court's going to be very, very costly. And court, you might not get in front of a judge for 3 months or 4 months or 6 months, given how backed up the court systems are right now. And many courts are not even open yet. So that being said, that's lost rent every single day until you get in front of a judge. And even when you get in front of a judge and the judge mandates rent is due, if the tenant doesn't have money, the tenant doesn't have money, and you're not going to have an easy time collecting. So you want to take all this into consideration with how you're positioning that relationship with the tenant. That's option 1. Option 2 is negotiating a payment plan. A payment plan that they can stand behind, that they're comfortable with making. So if they lost their job for a month and they are in the process of finding a new job, or they've just been hired and it's going to take another couple weeks for them to get back on their feet, if you are down 1 month's rent and you can just increase their rent by 25% for 4 months and get back on track, then that's a good option. That's an easy option, and it saves you from going through the headache of option 1. However, you are rolling the dice that everything goes to plan and you're not going to have another month of unpaid rent following the first month of unpaid rent. So be aware that the world is going through a shock right now, and sometimes the grass is not greener on the other side. So you might have that good tenant now, and you might want to go ahead and try to find that better tenant with a more stable source of income. But that next tenant might not be so great after all. So really be aware of who you have right now, and if that tenant is really, really trying to cooperate and really work with you, and they've been a great tenant for a long time, I would do whatever I could possibly do to keep them around. Option 3 is to play hardball. Play hardball with them, and kind of really, really push. And you want to be careful when you do this, because if the tenant is smart and that tenant knows their rights and they know that courts are closed right now, they might say, okay, if you want to mess with me, I'm going to mess with you. I'm not going to allow a process server to serve me. We're not going to begin this process until courts are officially open. So we're not going to be able to schedule a date for 3 months from today. And then by the time you schedule a date, courts are going to be so backed up that it might be another 3 months or 4 months before you get in front of a judge. And at this point, it could be 7 or 8 months worth of lost rent. And this whole time, they could be, rough on the apartment. And you're now thinking about this issue, and you're bringing all this negativity into your life, which is kind of unnecessary. However, your main threat to them, if they decide not to cooperate with you, is having the eviction on their record. And ultimately, that tenant does want a good reference from you. They're going to want to move. They're going to want to go somewhere else. And without that good reference, it makes it a little bit more challenging, because the next landlord is going to want to know where they lived before. And also, it can go on their credit score if you end up filing against them. So these are a few different ways of kind of working the system. However, there are some really interesting types of tenants out there just in general. I received a letter from one of my attorneys in LA, and he was sharing with me, I'll read this right here, that I'm currently handling an action where the rent's $55,000 a month. The tenant's refusing to pay. The tenant has over $4 million in liquid cash in the bank, and he'd rather preserve his capital than to pay rent. And the reason being is because he knows everything that I just said. It's going to probably take 3 months, 6 months, 8 months to get in front of the judge, long term, and that could be $500,000 in back rent, and they might settle for a lot less than that. Might settle for a fraction of that $500K to get the unit or that house available again, to get it vacant. And that's not including all the legal fees that the landlord's going to have to incur throughout that whole process. That being said, the tenant is in the power position right now, and most tenants know this. So you want to be really careful and smart and strategic with how you're navigating and working your relationships. And yeah, I mean, this is what it comes down to. It comes down to these relationships. It comes down to being smart and being able to read personalities and understanding which option is going to be best for your tenant in these times. We're in really just an interesting time right now where the power dynamic has shifted from the landlord being in control, in full control, to now the tenant being in much more control with the internet, with groups and rent strikes and
just overall collaboration. And now courts are closed, and it's kind of the holy grail for the tenant. So with all that said, you want to act in a very intelligent fashion and see which strategy and which action is going to be best for both you and the tenant long term, to where you can run a profitable business and the tenant will have a nice, safe place to live and pursue their own endeavors, whether it be their career or whatever it may be inside of your unit. So that being said, please do what you think is going to be right long term for your business, and not react in an emotional way and get upset. And because ultimately what ends up happening is when you make decisions based upon emotion, you end up regretting them. And with courts being closed and things not happening quickly like we'd like them to happen, you end up thinking about it over and over and over again, and all that energy being wasted on a small task like one tenant not paying rent is taken away from your creativity that could be used to further generate a heck of a lot more money than the little bit of money that you're currently losing with that tenant. And if you play it right, you won't lose any money with that tenant, or very, very little. So please smash the like button, comment, ask me any questions that you have, and consider subscribing. Thanks so much for watching.